Today I got Mr. James Jackson, the Senior Vice President of Mark Edward Partners, and he has a really interesting backstory and a profession and a niche in the industry that we don't think about, that isn't really represented amongst Black people in cannabis, but I think will become more and more important as we see more legalization. So I'm excited to have him on to share his background. How you doing today, bro?
I'm doing great, man. Appreciate you for having me on.
Man, no problem. We had a couple conversations prior to this, man, and I was really intrigued about the progress you've been making and you know, the benefits and the importance of your company. But before we jump into, you know, where you are now in cannabis, I'd love to get like a brief backstory of your professional background before you jump into the space.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to Howard University, the Howard University in Washington, D.C. I was fortunate enough to be a graduate of that great university. I actually graduated in 2010. Actually, I played football at Howard, actually transitioning off of football, and I actually kind of jumped head first into cannabis, right? So I went and got some experience in the Denver market for a few years, working with some vertically integrated companies, from everything from marketing to scaling to getting new licenses in different jurisdictions to even working with one of the companies that exited the space and sold one of their vertically integrated license. For me, I always knew that I needed to get experience specifically in outside industry, outside of cannabis. I knew one day I would find my way back. But specifically for me, I moved back to Washington, D.C., and I actually worked with PNC Bank. So I worked as the virtual wallet sales manager in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. 2011, 2012 timeframe was when PNC had launched Virtual Wallet, which was their new fintech product at the time. So specifically, I was in charge of the DC, Maryland, Virginia markets as far as bringing new households onto the bank. Got to do fun, exciting things in the space around banking, doing, Taste of DC, different guerrilla marketing events, kind of jumped straight into marketing and marketing management with that role. From there, I was fortunate enough actually to get promoted back to New Jersey, where I'm originally from. And I was working in a workplace banking role, as well as on the commercial side of banking a bit, where truly wanted to understand banking and the banking industry and how that relates and how that works as far as the banking system as a whole. I think for me, my next move that I made, I was actually recruited over to ADP, where I spent about 5.5 years, close to 6 years as a sales executive. Right, so just understanding payroll tax, the life cycle of an employee, literally from hire to fire, hire to retire, and everything in between. So that was a great experience for me, specifically on the sales side, as well as just understanding the intricacies of a business as it relates to human capital management, which we know employees are the most important part of an organization, right? That's what makes a company run. After leaving ADP, I actually moved over to Aon, which is obviously they're a player in the global market, one of the larger brokers in the global market. And immediately after starting with Aon and kind of jumping into risk management head first, I realized that I would be able to tap back into some of my cannabis experience. So in working with Aon, I started bringing on and working with cannabis companies. So I was one of the first producers to bring on a cannabis company to Aon, and Aon being a publicly traded company, that was a big move in the space, and they started to kind of enter more into the space as well. For me, being at Aon, they're a very large broker, obviously, and cater towards larger accounts. It came to a point where, I wanted to be in a spot where I could help everybody in the cannabis community, right? So not just the large MSOs and the publicly traded companies of the world, right? Of course, everybody wants to work with those size companies, but I wanted to be able to help everybody in my network. So that meant literally pre-license, right? Helping those companies that are just now going out for their first license, maybe their second license, and they need help and they need that letter showing that they have the ability to get general liability upon receiving a license. I work with companies that have one dispensary scaling to twos, right. Companies that have 5 or 6 that are trying to scale to 7 or 8.
Before we jump into that though,
I
want to kind of I want to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
when you jump back into the cannabis space, because this is something that I really try to make sure people have a good comprehension of, what was the reality of working in cannabis versus what you thought it was going to be like? What's that real sobering experience once you're actually in cannabis and you're trying to navigate successfully as you're building something out?
Right. So for me, being in an industry, I guess essentially ancillary industry right now that supports the cannabis industry, right, or is service oriented and serves the cannabis industry. I think just a sobering moment. I mean, listen, as a salesperson, right, you have the most confidence in the world. You think you're going to be able to run in and basically take over everybody's business and grab everybody's business and work with everybody in the space you've ever wanted to, right? I think what you find is it's a little bit more, the cannabis community is very close-knit, but it's very tight-knit, meaning it's not the same type of thing where you just cold call into a cannabis company or you connect somebody on LinkedIn. I mean, I've done those things, but it's more so how you network, right? It's more so showing yourself as a thought leader in the space, truly knowing what you are doing in the space and being able to transfer those skills into the industry. So for me, it was, just a sober moment that it was like, listen, I made a name for myself in normalized industry. So for me coming into cannabis, it was kind of a moment of having to start over, right? Where, you have to have the ability, obviously, to show that you know what you're doing. Specifically in insurance, listen, risk management is one thing. Knowing insurance is one thing. But just because you know a lot about insurance and you worked with real estate companies in the past and you've worked with consumer and consumer-driven companies in the past, that doesn't mean that you know cannabis, right? That doesn't mean that you know exactly what's going to be a top of mind at a cannabis company and the risks that outlie specifically for a cannabis company versus another regulated industry. So it's really just the fact of having to start over and just the fact of thinking, like, if anybody in the industry thinks that, you're just going to be visiting companies and kind of smoking with the executives and moving through the ranks, that's not the case, right?
Right. That got dispelled along, or that you're going to come in and make $1 million in 6 months.
Yeah, no, it is not something overnight, right? And I think everybody in the industry can tell you it's not for the faint of heart, whether you're touching the plant and cultivating or you're working on an outside industry that's supporting the cannabis industry itself. It's a growing process. You have to start from very small or close to nothing and be able to build.
I do have one more question for you, though, just so
please.
We can kind of place where your company exists in the chain, right? So at what point is insuring your company within cannabis vital? Is it required to get a license? Is it required to open up? Is it required to stay open? Are you audited? Like, what is the reasoning that an entrepreneur has to have insurance in or around the cannabis space right now?
Yeah, and I mean, listen, that's a great question, right? And I think you have to think about it a couple ways. So one, it's something that is a check the box thing. It is something you have to do in order to get a license in most cities that I know of and clients that I've worked with. In order to even, as part of your application process, you have to show or have a letter from an insurer, an insurance company, a broker, saying that upon you being awarded that license, you have the ability to at least secure general liability. And there's normally different levels and different rates depending on the city that relates to. Now, as it relates to outside of the fact that you have to do it in a licensing process, I mean, the reason you have insurance in general is to protect your business. All commercial insurance, whether you're in the cannabis industry or not, is to protect your business. And I think one thing that I like to dispel, and I guess not even dispel, but just have conversations with different operators who have operated in the legacy market prior to bringing their business into the legal cannabis industry, is the days of thinking that you have to keep 400, 500,000 aside in case, a crop goes bad, or you lose some cargo, or you're robbed, whatever that may be. The days of thinking like that are over with. You now have the ability to get insurance to be able to have a windfall in case, you have a loss, whatever that loss may be, right? And I think the other thing that's important on the cannabis insurance side is you have to have a policy that is actually going to respond if you have a loss, right? So what's happened in that, and I guess what's kind of nuanced in the cannabis industry, cannabis insurance industry, is this is a federally illegal illicit substance, right? Insurance is state mandated, so that's why there's ways around that. But because there's not a lot of loss history, because this is a brand new industry, because of the risk associated with the cannabis plant itself, there's a lot of exclusions that come with these policies, right? And you have to be able to have a broker, an account executive, somebody that knows what they're doing to be able to comb through these exclusions and make sure that if you have a loss, your policy is actually going to respond. The point of having insurance is that it works when you need it, right? And unfortunately, what happens a lot of the time is that, the last thing you want as a business owner is to have one of these policies that has an exclusion on it that specifically excludes the loss you just had. So essentially what you've done is you've paid for an expensive piece of paper and it's nice to have, but it's not actually protecting your business, right?
Okay. And then just to kind of expound on like the grander picture of where you exist in the space, how many, outside of yourself and your company, how many Black owned or operated cannabis insurance companies are there? And, for those who may be interested in transitioning from traditional insurance into the space, what's that process like right now?
All right. So the insurance industry in general is not a very diverse industry, right? Before we even get into the cannabis side, positions of power in insurance, such as producers, which is my role, people bringing the business in the door and servicing their clients. When you're talking about managing directors, people that are actually running these companies, CEOs, very slim, it's not a diverse crowd, right? When I've been in the insurance industry outside of this company, I was one of 5, one of 6, right? There is, I believe there is less than 0.5% representation of the African-American in power roles in insurance, right? So that'll let you know how scarce it is and how much of us don't exist in the insurance space. Now, when you come over to cannabis insurance, I would say that even ticks down a level and becomes even less. So I haven't met any other Black producers that are working on cannabis, that are head of cannabis insurance sectors at their companies. I haven't met any other. I know there are a few that work on the carrier side. I've met a few that work on the carrier side and that I've worked with in order to service our clients. But I believe I'm one of few.
Right. You're the only one that I know. I would love to get your insight on, what you think has to happen for it to be more of you to be created in the industry successfully. Like, how do we not only create more James Jacksons, right, but how do we position them to be successful for years to come, to have their own companies, to move up in companies that they're employed with? What do you think has to happen as legalization continues to grow?
Yeah, I think we have to be given the opportunity first and foremost, right? Whether we're talking about cannabis specific or we're talking about cannabis supporting, as you know, listen, Black people have been unproportionately targeted when it comes to being incarcerated for cannabis, period. However, the popularity of cannabis and the reason that cannabis is so popular and the growth of cannabis is something that we are 100% responsible for. Maybe I'll say 98%. Maybe I'll give a 2% to the outliers, right? So we have to, of course, have the ability, have the opportunity to take advantage now and be a part of a budding industry, right? To be a part and be able to take advantage of not only making the money, but the opportunities and also the notoriety, right? Why should these companies and a lot of these, larger publicly traded companies be celebrated when honestly we were the ones doing the work, right? So I think first and foremost, it comes from a legislative position, right? That each and every state and then break down every city and then every borough needs to have a specific set aside for African Americans, right? When it comes to licensing, there needs to be a specific number of applications that they are setting aside specifically for African Americans to be able to get into the industry. They also need to think about, and this is something that New Jersey is doing, is making micro business license, not forcing somebody to try to build enough capital to come up and be able to have to be vertically integrated immediately. Right? that's excluding people from getting into the industry. So allowing people to, grab one license, whether that's delivery, whether that's just cultivation, and then be able to grow organically, and then be able to scale as they can, I think is more reasonable and gives us a lot better chance of getting into the industry. Okay. Now, when you talk about insurance, that's just a matter of, and I think this is just a bigger picture, is people like you and I, really, we have to reach down. We have to reach back. We got to be able to pull up younger brothers and sisters and help them get into the industry and help them navigate. And that's something that I take pride in is, it's my goal, first and foremost, to represent as many, if not all, of the African-American owned operators of cannabis companies in the space, right? Period. First and foremost, I want to be a resource. I want to be a help. If it's helping somebody get a license, whatever I need to do to help more people get into the space is exactly what I want to be doing. And in my current role at Mark Edward Partners, I'm also the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's excellent because I'm in charge of hiring and bringing more Black and brown people into our company, an already diverse company, but into our company, into these roles, producer, managing director role, right? So that we're more of a representation in the insurance space as well as in the cannabis space.
Okay, and you touched on something that I want to pivot into because I think it's going to be a major domino effect. You spoke on New Jersey and the upcoming probable legalization on November 3rd, right? And I'm of the belief that once New Jersey legalizes as a state, you're going to see New York State, you're going to see Connecticut, you're going to see more states up and down the East Coast start to really take a look at this and see the benefits and the commerce that it brings in. How important is it for like the New Jersey resident to pay attention to this process, you being from New Jersey, and also to position themselves to be able to benefit from it somehow?
Right. I mean, it's wildly important, right? And to get the word out, it's on our ballot for November 3rd here in New Jersey. It's public question number 1. It's on the back of the ballot. Please flip your ballot over. It's public question number 1 on the back of the ballot and vote yes. I think for the community of New Jersey, and I'm going to speak specifically for the Black community of New Jersey, right? So one thing that I do know about New Jersey is we have one of the highest racial disparities as it relates to incarceration, right? It's a 12-to-1 ratio, which is beyond me. And I even heard Governor Murphy speak about it the other day because it's beyond him. And I would say that a huge amount of those arrests and those incarcerations is because of cannabis. There's no question in my mind. So now when we have the opportunity to turn a huge expenditure for the state every year that they spend on arresting and making cannabis arrests and prosecuting cannabis arrests can be turned into much more of an asset, right? Can be given to our school systems, can be given to our transportation systems, can be used to improve infrastructure in our state. And, more specifically, it will hopefully help expunge the records of our Black and brown sisters and brothers who have had and have spent time and have done their payment to society, right? And I think more importantly is also allowing those same people that have had those charges and have had unfortunately been incarcerated for it, allowing them the opportunity to get into the industry, right? Allowing them to participate in an industry that, frankly, they've been operating in to feed their family for a number of years, right? So I think for New Jersey, I think the vote obviously is easy. We need to vote yes. That goes without even thinking, and I truly believe that that's going to pass. But I think what's more important is what's the legislation that follows, and what does it look like from a social equity standpoint. Hearing 15%, 20%, whatever that may look like, I think it personally needs to be higher than that. But that's where the concentration needs to be, right? Is how do we make sure that people that have suffered are going to be part of the industry and reap the benefits?
Before I let you go, I know you've seen, in your line of work, the inside of a lot of cannabis operators, right? Successfully and unsuccessfully. For the person who wants to come into this, or the group that's coming together to try to have a license in New Jersey or maybe whatever state they're in that's already legal, what advice can you give to someone that say, you know, you need to make sure you're doing these things or having this perspective to keep your company sustainable and profitable? What advice would you have?
The advice, first and foremost, I would have is really do your homework. Really decide how you want to get into the business. And it might not be direct touching the plant. It might not be cultivation. It might not be retail. It might be, you know, a technology company that supports all the companies within the city. It may be a security company. I would say pick which route you're going to go and run at it 100 miles an hour. What I know about cannabis is not only is it a booming space, but everybody wants to be involved. I haven't had a conversation in the past 2-3 years where I've had a conversation with somebody and they would say, no, I have no interest in cannabis. And this is a wide range and spectrum of people that I've spoken to. So it's something that you need to get on, and you need to get on quick. We know that being first to market with something, or at least coming to market with something of substance, companies do better when they focus on those things. Now, I guess as it relates to things that you need to be doing, obviously studying and knowing everything you need to know about the niche that you're going into.
Right.
I think the other thing is you need to be building and putting people around you and building a team that is going to be able to support you. That's going to be able to support your idea. That you're going to be able to bounce things off of. And when I say a team, I mean a qualified team. I mean people that either know and have cannabis experience, or people that are coming from an outside industry and bringing their expertise to see how that fits into what you're building from a cannabis perspective.
And lastly, just to touch on what you said just now, because you brought a wealth of like finance and brokerage information with you once you stepped into the space. What did that particular vantage point, how did that benefit you understanding finance? You know, so how does that help you in the pursuit of possibly raising capital or helping someone else raise capital, or just managing the assets that you do have now?
I mean, it helps tremendously. I think cannabis is a little bit tricky because it's not banking as well as investing haven't opened up institutionally, right? So it's a bit different, but it helped me truly understand different companies' P&L, I think, if we break it down to that, right? And it also helped me understand where I fit into that P&L from what I'm able to service. And I think more than anything, understanding finance allowed me to recognize pretty quickly among some of the larger cannabis companies that I was working with, I think, who was growing too big too fast. I think that's one of the things, unfortunately, that is happening in the industry a lot, is companies are trying to bite off far more than they can chew. They're trying to jump off, you know, they start with 2 licenses. They're now immediately growing to 4 licenses, but they don't have the infrastructure built behind them in order to sustain that type of business. So that really helped me recognize that, and it helped me advise, I think, some companies that I saw were on that trek, that they should possibly think about scaling down, taking a second, really blowing out, whether it be white labeling or cultivation, before they decided to pivot to the whatever new venture that they were looking at. I think more so than anything, it helped me recognize kind of the outliers and the people that would be around for a lot longer, and the people that were really just looking in it to be able to build a company that was big enough to be able to exit and move to the next venture.
Okay, perfect, man. And I definitely appreciate your insight and your information. I would love for you to give our viewers where they can follow you, your company, and your story on social media, just in case they have any questions for themselves or if they want to reach out to you directly.
Yeah, please. And listen, I appreciate the opportunity to be on here today, Andrew. Honestly, anytime that I can get out and spread the word for what I do, as well as the fact that I would love to be a resource to anybody that's getting into the space. However I can help, I would love to be a help. So I think first and foremost, my email address is jej@markedwardpartners.com. That's my email address. If you have a question, a comment, anything I can help with, please send me an email there. And on my Instagram, it is at jayjax80. So JAYJAX80. And I share a lot of cannabis information on there, as well as I think what's important, what's going on with society as well. Love to interface with anybody that's interested in jumping in the space, or any operators.
Especially if you're in the tri-state area. So if you live or work anywhere around New York State, New Jersey, Connecticut, I think who just legalized this past week? Was it Vermont?
Vermont, Maine's recreational program just started over the past few days. Listen, I work also anywhere in the country. I have clients in LA, Denver. Listen, please don't be afraid to tap in. It's a conversation. If there's any way that I can help, any value you could bring to me, any value I could bring to you, love to have a conversation.
Of course, bro. I appreciate you for your time.
Hey, appreciate it, brother.